In recent years, certain South African cities have undergone dramatic changes as vast infrastructural undertakings have begun transforming the skyline. Kilometers of tunnels now snake below city streets, and millions of tons of earth and rock have been extracted to make way for new transit lines. Meanwhile, hundreds of newly constructed bridges stretch across the urban horizon like intricate webs of concrete and steel. One of the most notable of these ambitious projects is the Gautrain, sometimes pronounced Gautrain, Africa's first high-speed rail system. In the province of Gauteng alone, as many as 65 individual construction sites once operated simultaneously to bring this monumental initiative to life. On any typical day during peak construction, roughly 10,500 workers contributed to the railway's progress. According to project managers, spending could climb to 3 million rand per hour, a figure that could balloon to around 30 million or even 50 million rand a day during especially demanding phases. This monumental effort speaks to South Africa's determination to modernize and expand its infrastructure, improving transportation options for both daily commuters and travelers from across the globe. Gauteng, which translates to place of gold, is South Africa's smallest but wealthiest province. It owes its name to the abundant mineral wealth discovered in the late 19th century when gold rushes reshaped the social and economic landscape of the region. Today, Gauteng is home to Johannesburg, South Africa's largest city, as well as Pretoria, the nation's administrative capital. Although it occupies only a small fraction of the country's land area, Gauteng generates over 10% of Africa's total GDP, making it one of the continent's most powerful economic engines. Since the dismantling of apartheid in the early 1990s, Gauteng's economy has grown rapidly, offering new opportunities and attracting people from across South Africa and beyond. This influx of new residents has created what many describe as a second gold rush, one driven by opportunity rather than precious metals. Yet along with economic and population growth comes an inevitable strain on existing infrastructure. Roads that were once manageable have become chronically congested. The N1 highway, which is the busiest in South Africa, has been especially overwhelmed. At peak hours, a drive between Johannesburg and Pretoria, only about 50 kilometers apart, can stretch to 2 hours or more. City planners, politicians, and business leaders recognize the looming transportation crisis. If Gauteng's infrastructure failed to keep pace, the region's economic engine could grind to a halt. Thus emerged the vision for a new mass transportation system that would leapfrog older, outdated models. South Africa is in many ways a land dominated by cars. For decades, personal vehicles served as the primary means of transport, reflecting both the cultural preference for private ownership and the legacy of urban designs that favored wide roads and sprawling suburbs. However, as Gauteng's population soared, these roads became increasingly congested, a phenomenon akin to clogged arteries in a human body. Officials from the Gauteng provincial government feared that, without a dramatic solution, traffic jams would continue to worsen. The older metro rail system, built largely in the 1950s and 1960s, no longer aligned with the modern commuters' travel patterns. As a result, it was widely deemed inadequate to tackle current and future demand. The Gautrain was thus envisioned both as an alternative to these congested roads and a high-speed upgrade to South Africa's existing rail infrastructure. The Gautrain network was designed to connect the commercial hubs of Johannesburg and Pretoria with OR Tambo International Airport, the busiest airport in Africa. Spanning roughly 80 kilometers, the route required brand new rail lines, tunnels, bridges and stations. What made the project particularly daunting was that it was built from scratch in the midst of two already bustling cities. The cost to complete such an endeavor was originally pegged around 7 billion rand, but estimates soon soared as engineers and planners wrestled with unforeseen challenges, including difficult geological conditions and the cost of land expropriation. Ultimately, the price tag reached approximately 30 billion rand or more, sparking considerable debate among citizens and politicians. Some questioned whether those funds might be better spent on housing for the millions of people who lacked adequate shelter, or on upgrading cheaper modes of public transport like buses and minibuses. One argument was that many locals, particularly in lower income brackets, depended on inexpensive taxis, vans, or older rail lines. The Gautrain, by contrast, was seen by critics as primarily serving wealthier South Africans. Nonetheless, supporters of the project countered that the high-speed system would stimulate economic growth, create jobs, and ease traffic congestion for everyone in the long run. In a country with a painful history of forced removals, any infrastructure project requiring people to be relocated was bound to provoke controversy. The Gautrain route needed to follow the most direct and feasible path, which often cut through privately held property. While the government offered compensation, many landowners felt the payments were inadequate. Legal battles ensued, with emotional public meetings in which residents voiced their fears and anger. "If it means that we have to take this to the highest level of court, that's exactly what we will do," declared one upset property owner, "and if we have to stop this train in its tracks, we will try." Government officials empathized to a degree, but emphasized the broader public interest. Recognizing how sensitive land ownership is in South Africa, they held numerous consultations. "We will compensate," one official stated, "because we are expropriating." Yet public skepticism lingered, especially among those who felt personally impacted. These tensions are testament to how closely tied land is to people's sense of security and identity in South Africa. Despite the obstacles, construction pressed on across 65 separate sites. It was an engineering feat unlike anything Gautrain had seen before. An informal joke among project managers was that every morning they would drive to the project office wondering, "What new headache will we face today?" Cost overruns added to the stress. The project's shifting price tag became a magnet for criticism in the media, but from the engineers' perspective, the project's difficulty was undeniable. They had to excavate tunnels in densely populated urban centers, thread viaducts through hectic traffic corridors, and fortify sections of rail built on notoriously unstable soil. Of the 80 kilometers of track, roughly 15 ran underground, primarily around Johannesburg. Engineers had to dig these tunnels using a combination of drill and blast techniques and a specialized tunnel boring machine, TBM. With conventional drill and blast, the process involves systematically boring holes in the rock face, packing them with explosives, and detonating them to remove about 5 meters of material at a time. After the dust settles, crews must clear the rubble before repeating the cycle.